Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the podcast. This week, I was given the wonderful opportunity to be able to catch up with James. Now, James runs Shogun Social over in Southampton, and we were able to talk about TikTok, why you should be thinking about creating content, why you need to create content, and what the value in doing it through video format is. So if you do want to hear more and do take some value from this conversation, I would love to know what you think in the comment section down below. I'll be back very, very soon with a brand new episode of the podcast, and I'm going to hand over to James to talk a little bit more about what he does and why he does it.
Hi, my name's James. I run a company called Shogun Social, and we help businesses post more like creators. That's the long and short of what we do. Essentially, it's content creation, specifically helping with stuff in terms of TikTok, podcasting, posting on Instagram, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. Wherever your brand fits, we help you post like a creator, a native video on there to make very good use out of your organic social media, because brands haven't been doing it so well so far. And, that's what we're here to fix.
Amazing. And, I really appreciate the time, James. And, I think the content creation space is a really unique one right now because there's so many people who start out on it but don't have a level of consistency, right? And I think, as a place to start, I think, how does someone really get their teeth into it, right? Because, and I'm sure we'll come on to why in a moment as well. And, for the viewer's sake, I think it's important to firstly establish to an extent either how you're going to do it or why you're going to do it first, before then we go into the clouds of like, oh, this is why content creation is amazing, right? Because me and James can sit here and say, this is amazing, but we know that because of the compounding effect of doing it, right? Because we've done it for, well, I've done it for 10 years. James has done it for at least, four-ish years? Somewhere around there?
Marketing for 4 and this business for 1 year and 10.
So, we're both very seasoned in the respect to how we go about our business, in the respect to how we go about content creation, right? But the key thing for me is actually, because, we get this all the time. People say to me, oh, we would love to do a promotional video. We need to do a branded video. And I'm like, okay, great. But what do you expect that to do? Right? And I think for me, if you're not going to be consistent, you're going to have that one-off video. It won't do as much as people think. I mean, what's your perspective on like the balance between having consistent content go out and then having like this piece of artwork from the video space, for example?
Yeah. A lot of brands have fallen into what I call the culture of campaigns. This is because it's a marketing thing, right? Marketing campaigns will always be here to stay, and they need to because they're supposed to secure seasonal objectives, sales objectives, wherever it happens to be. But in my head, marketing, sales, and social have very clearly separated from each other over the pandemic, and it's something that is still essentially pushed into one thing. They're essentially told to do everything, and with companies' focus is to do nothing but campaigns in regards to here's a certain amount of money, here's a shiny video, make it do the thing and make it print me money. It doesn't really work like that anymore, especially with the changes to Apple's privacy, for instance, with iOS. Remarketing is very difficult now. It's not impossible, but it's not as easy as it used to be. Google were getting rid of cookies in 2023, so we best find a way to make sure that remarketing data is useful. If we don't have an always-on value-based approach to organic social and build an actual community and actual interest in our brand, we don't have anything. You don't have a leg to stand on. And a lot of brands will have a certain following, but I guarantee they're not activated. Samsung is one of the biggest examples of that. I think it has over 2 million followers on Facebook, and their average likes is 1 or 2 likes. Imagine having that many unactivated followers because the algorithm has deemed their content so corporate and so bad that it's just not shown. This is why brands need to post more like creators, because it doesn't matter what your marketing messages are. If you sell to someone organically, they don't care. They're not here to be sold to. They're here to be educated, inspired, or entertained. If it's not one of those 3, chuck it in the bin. So you need to reevaluate how your brand comes across, how you're building that brand equity, and think about what are the clear reasons people would follow this page. And if you can't think of 3 good ones, aren't just updates on what we sell, you haven't got any standing at all.
Yeah, and I think it's become and will continue to be this more personality driven concept, which is, as you say, rightly say, about being a creator more than being just a business, right? I would be curious to see how some of the big players, such as the Coca-Colas of the world, etc., actually tried to go backwards, because of course how they built their brand was person, suddenly went to like slowly through time, they slowly pulled away from showing that personality drive, but they still have a level of like brand values attached to it. And I think you can have, I mean, you know, you work with a lot more people in regards internally than we do, so I'm interested in your approach in respect to how do you balance who kind of gets a voice on social, because obviously in an industry, especially as what you offer, surely isn't it really important to make sure that that kind of voice is spread so it's not just the James show, right?
That can be difficult. You know, initially in earlier iterations of our team, I was the only one that was comfortable making social content. Now everyone that joins us is more than happy to get involved, and actually the podcast itself that we produce has moved over to just the team. I'm not in it, so they can focus on, you know, social updates, trends, hot takes, things that can provide genuine value to people, because they are the boots on the ground making it happen every day. I do a lot of this stuff. I do obviously a lot of the founder stuff. I do a lot of the sales, right? But I'm not posting every day like they are. So they're the ones that know it. And showing that diverse cast, showing the different voices and the different takes can relate to different people. Activating your team to be your content creators is ideal, especially if you have community managers, business development executives. If they're going to be the faces that take someone on the customer journey, you might as well have them at the top of your funnel to bring people through. It just makes the most sense, because that's then seamless if you're looking at a customer journey map. And you know, that's why social is so important. The average stat is, I think you need to see something at least 7 times before you take a considering action. So in that, where are your touch points coming from? If you've got a massive amount of money to do direct mail, amazing. If you've got radio, TV, great. But most of the time, it's I either do ads on social or Google, and that's about it. It's a flash in the pan. Your stuff cannot be a flash in the pan anymore. It needs to be constant top of mind, and showing off as much of your team as possible is going to be ideal. And then it doesn't just look like the James show, because it was early on. It's been a recent fix, don't get me wrong, within the last 2 months. Because honestly, it was one of those ones where I don't know how I can't force these people to go put their faces out there. But now we have a team that's much more willing to. It's been a massive help, because otherwise I look like a freelancer just pretending to have a team. It's a bit of a weird one. But now we have a really nice mixture of stuff, and we've planned it out nicely. So it's essentially shared between all of us, especially if you want to exit the business one day. If value is all tied towards the founder, you can't get out. So you need to diversify that brand standing between lots of different people.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot we could go there, but I think, you know, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with, you know, for example, our business model, as you know, is I'm the main person within the company, and then I hire contractors or freelancers to help me where the projects arise, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that model to an extent, and to be honest, looking at the video space specifically, that's where a lot of video creators are going, because they don't want to necessarily be tied into I work for Brunter Media specifically, right? They want to have the freedom and the choice to be able to say, I work with Brunter Media on this project, this project, this project, and this project, but probably not this project or this project because XYZ, right? But I think for me, I mean, in most cases, clients don't mind or care. But I think from a social point of view, it does become a challenge, right? And, you know, for me, I asked myself very early on, do I want to be in the position where I want to sell? Right now, I don't. And to be honest, I'll be surprised if I do change that, because the company's named after me, right? So it's kind of going to always have this emotional connection to me. So I'll always have a level of connection. But the reason why I built the brand in the way I did was because I didn't believe that I was ever going to sell it, right? That was never the goal. Now, that doesn't mean for a second, as I grow it, that I may not, right? I still think that's unlikely, but there's ways you can tweak and change that content. But I think for people who especially are starting out, who's a lot of people who listen to this content and, you know, consume the podcast, are people who maybe are not 100% with going on camera, or they're like, I don't know, I don't want to sound like an idiot, etc. I mean, what advice would you give to someone who obviously is quite seasoned in being on camera, so to speak, or being in content, so to speak, to actually go about creating or starting that process of creating content?
This is a case of it's individual to everyone. And I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of personal psychology that's tied to posting, even for your brand. It also depends on your mindset. I'm of the mindset of I will do what others won't to succeed, in terms of putting myself out there, because there's plenty of brand that won't, and you know that is absolutely fine. But if you can, you must, in my opinion. It's one of those ones where it's become so vital, especially vertical video content. Now, when we think about that, we have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest. that all have vertical video as the main format they wanted to digest it. Maybe not so much YouTube, but the rest do. I know Twitter is testing it right now as we speak. So in that sense, if you're not creating that, you're missing out on all the reach, especially on places like Instagram, where if you post it as a reel, if you have 200 followers, you'll probably get 2,000 views on it. But if you post it as a normal video, you're probably getting 50 views. It's a massive difference, and they're rewarding you for putting content in that particular area. But you have to start somewhere that's achievable. So I tend to start podcasting is my absolute favorite, especially podcasting with guests or with part of your team. It's a really easy way to get in a conversational flow with someone. You don't have to have the camera on at first, because you can create video content without the camera on. Obviously, there's tools like Veed.io and Headliner that allow you to create, Vox Pop style waveform things that you might have seen before. That's super easy to make. And that can get you started and finding those good golden moments. And I think 80% of podcasts are discovered via social anyway. So if you're trying to drive, more listeners to your full podcast, then focus on your clips at first. Don't focus on the full thing, because that's where most of the traffic is coming from regardless. And if you do a whole bunch of social SEO work on it in terms of where you're optimizing on Spotify and all the rest. But clips are massively important. And just start there. Start identifying those golden moments, get used to hearing your voice, and then level up into a Zoom podcast, and then level up into something in person, and go step by step. And fit that in amongst what your capacity is as well to create. If it's once a week, every Friday, smash it in there, cool, done. And just make sure you can stay on top of it, because that's the hardest bit. When you realize how many clips you can pull out of one podcast, it does get a little bit overwhelming, but that's where you stick to your gold moments. I set a KPI of 3. I want 3 gold moments per podcast as a minimum, done, dusted. And that's how we play it for our clients as well. So now you've got 4 pieces of content out of the one, and you just have to activate it. Anyone that's interested, look at the Garyvee long form content method, because that's going to be the best place to start. He's got a 70-page presentation on how to do it. Super easy and makes a lot of sense, although he does take it quite far. So start with what you can manage at first and then expand outwards.
Yeah, and I think, we use Gary as an example, of course, because, he's someone who has really pushed forward the industry in that respect. And I think we can be very floating, pie in the sky kind of examples when we use Gary, though, because something that people need to keep in mind with Gary is he has teams of editors, teams of distributors, teams of writers, teams of this, teams of the, multiple people times him, right, all the time. Right, so his 24 hours is not 24 hours. It's 24 hours times 10 people or 15 people or 25 people to create his content for his personal brand alone. Never minding his media company plus then his NFT stuff, then also other, and so on and so on and so on. Right. But I think you can take the principle, if you're willing to put a bit of graft in, especially at the start, with what you were exactly describing, which is like create that piece of content, then cut out those bits, do whatever you have to do. And I think there's something that, I did really take from Gary is the document don't create principle, which it sounds a bit like a cheat code to an extent, but it's really easy once you understand how to do it. Right? Because you're going to have those conversations. You're going to get those quote unquote golden moments anyway. If you're having one-to-ones, if you're having conversations, if you're having meetings, etc., you're going to have thoughts every day. So, in most cases, I leave this camera set up so that I can do a quick blur to camera when the idea comes. And the reason why I do that is because then we're constantly never looking at or being like, oh my god, what's the next piece of content I need to film, or need to create, right, or need to put out, or I try to push myself to constantly have something that I'm doing that looks really cool, or it's actually, we do as much behind the scenes stuff as we can, along with me giving talks and presentations, and everything we're trying to do, and we're going to try and film everything we try and do for this exact compounding effect that ends up happening. And I think it also has a compounding effect on your own personal thoughts around it as well, because once you're okay with the fact of recording yourself, that has a byproduct on the respect to the amount of confidence you'll have talking to a room, because by proxy, if you're recording that room or recording that conversation within that room, you can capture those golden moments, but also it's a way to build up to have that presentation style. Have you found that, let me ask you, have you found by doing content creation, it's allowed you to not feel as nervous when it came to like, such and such wants James to do a presentation about social media or TikTok or etc.?
It's a good point. I think it may have had a subtle effect. So I've never actually stepped back to think about it, especially when I take certain speaking roles. I normally take them like, even if it, from the outside perspective, I don't think this would be worth it for my business. I'm like, it doesn't matter because I'm going to get content out of it. you can take stuff which can, be an easy win for you. Even if it wouldn't bring you a direct ROI, you can make sure that that content then provides you that in the long term, and how much you can get out of it in terms of clips and the rest. So I think it does help from that regard. But I think we're privileged because we're service-based businesses, and showing our expertise is what we need to do. For those in retail and e-commerce and stuff like that, it's a very different beast in what they have to create. And I think we'll see a massive increase in larger brands hiring in-house creators, especially for vertical video content. TikTok especially, it's going to be a massive thing, because let's say if you are a large shopping center and you have multiple shops within it, you're going to need to get brand permissions and all the rest, but you also have to show off different events, the walkarounds, everything like that, and even be in certain trends and memes, because that's a big part of this TikTok culture especially. And then when you figure out that, okay, here's your set, here's what we can make, here's what we can emulate, right, who's going to do it? You're going to do it? No, you're going to do it? And everyone just looks around the office. So I think hiring an in-house creator, if you don't have almost the privilege is for you to show off your expertise, if it's more product based, then leverage finding just someone to be the face of your brand and make stuff in different ways. There's always a way around it. And especially when you're researching it, look up 70% creators and then 30% brands, because creators are the one doing it right in the first place. And that's why we focus everything around it, because there's no point doing your traditional brand research, because no one's doing it correctly anyway. So yeah, think about that as well when you're creating video content, because there are different use cases for everything.
I think that it's been interesting, because I'm fortunate enough where I get to talk to what I would call more traditional marketing managers, right? About, okay, well, what's the plan and etc. and what we're trying to do, etc. And they're still very like, we're going to have photography and we're going to use it this way. We're going to put it on social. We're going to put it in a blog. We're going to do this, etc. Time. It's like, you can do that, and I get why you're doing that to an extent, but you're missing a golden boat here, right? Now, arguably, you've already missed the golden boat, arguably, right? Now, we're kind of in that weird, we're kind of in that middle step at the moment. And it was interesting because I was, I'm giving a talk this week, as I mentioned, but one of the parts of that talk, I had to do research on what the most monthly users were in regards to apps on social. And I was actually really shocked by the answer. And because it's coming out afterwards, we can talk about it. But what most people would never tell you is that TikTok is the third most used app from a monthly user point of view across the board, right? I think the figure was like 755 million monthly users, which is only better than Instagram and Facebook, who is 1.1 billion and like 2.1 or something, who are owned by each other. So you might as well combine those two, because Facebook owns Instagram. So basically, TikTok is the only non-meta owned thing which you can get a huge amount of attention on, right? So in only essence, if you're going to commit to doing one platform, arguably it should be TikTok right now. Right? Just
not arguably, it should be. If you want organic attention, I hate to sound like Gary again, but yeah, it needs to be 1000%. I mean, when you look at the total downloads, I think Instagram sits about 1.7 billion users, whether they're active or not, they should be active users. And then Facebook is around 2 point something, right? Then, TikTok sits at 1.2 billion in terms of actual users. That's ridiculous. If you don't think your target audience is on TikTok, you're lying to yourself at this point. You're just scared of it because it's so new. And it does have to be strategized in a completely different way than any other social media network would. You cannot have a blanket approach with just your basic photography and here's what we do and here's when the sale's on. It's never going to happen. You need to have someone who's brave enough to be in front of that camera. And it's not even hard content. All the content that TikTok wants performs the best is made straight on a smartphone using smartphone editors. About any fancy business, you can level up once you get more following and everything else like that. But it's authenticity that it demands, and brands aren't ready to hand over that authenticity because they are locked to being, I am a brand, I am perfect, I am flush. Whereas they have reverse engineered it, and it was a post-pandemic change. So if you don't come across as a human being, you're up the creek without TikTok.
Yeah, and it reminds me of early Facebook, early Instagram, those kind of very organic based, like arguably not even, because TikTok has this like known kind of, it's lip syncing, it's dancing, which was obviously Musically, right? And that's where that kind of, from my perspective at least, that's where it came from. right? People not necessarily appreciating that when TikTok bought Musical.ly, that yes, it embedded all of those things, and yes, it was still part of that, but the goal was actually to create TikTok as this larger platform, which is now becoming, because we wouldn't have had YouTube Shorts, we wouldn't have had Instagram Reels, we wouldn't have then had following Facebook Reels, etc. Because if TikTok didn't prove that it worked, those companies, Google and Meta, would have never have invested and said, we're going to have this vertical video infinitely scrolling thing. But I mean, I think we're to an extent, from a B2B point of view, leaving out LinkedIn. I mean, I'd be curious on your input on that, because I've also noticed that the organic reach on there is actually really interesting, because
it always has been. I love LinkedIn for that. It doesn't, as it's grown, it has not punished users. And that's a clear factor that's been in both Facebook and Instagram. Like if you do LinkedIn correctly, you still get the right amount of reach. Like I just gained 2 followers as we spoke right now. I just saw the notification pop up. Like it will still carry on working for you in the background. It has a longer content life cycle than a lot of other platforms. Sometimes stuff can go up to a month and still get views. TikTok's around 2 weeks, so it's longer than you think. Facebook and Instagram is, I believe, 1 to 3 days. So it does reward you a lot more. It gives you more tools to work with. And I wouldn't be surprised to be starting vertical video feeds in LinkedIn. But yeah, going back to the TikTok point, people seriously underestimate how much the communities have developed. So TikTok themselves phrase it as community talks, right? You often hear the phrase, I'm on X side of TikTok, I'm on the advertising side of TikTok. It's a huge part of targeting communities and something they're going to be bringing to the paid feature. It's going, you can now target just hashtag fit talk or like hashtag entrepreneur talk. The paid feature will now soon allow you to actually target those individual communities and all of the massive TikToks within it, because each community has its own trends, own filters, own sounds, and that culture brings a nice togetherness, and it's something that doesn't exist on any other platform in that format. And also a lot of TikTok is thought of audio first, which a lot of brands are not prepared for as well, because often the way we plan out TikTok individually on our side, audio, idea, execution. So you need to figure out what that sound is first before you do anything else, because your sound will dictate your views 100%. And organically, when you plan stuff out like that, it can really help you. But yeah, it's just such a different beast. It can't be underestimated. But I always like to pick a top 3 platforms to use and put them in priority order. So for us, it's LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, and how much we prioritize each one and what we make content for. So LinkedIn is still our best returning channel. I've had many more organic acquirers for LinkedIn, had one off of TikTok, which some people might be surprised to know. But yes, they actually do come, and the engagement from it is much more of a brand awareness tool than anything else. And then Instagram is just the new Facebook, in my opinion, but it's a staple that's not going anywhere just yet.
I think none of the ones we're talking about here, including Facebook, is going to necessarily go anywhere anytime soon. How one consumes them will probably change, right? Like Facebook has been for a long time this kind of more kind of, I catch up with my friends, I catch up with people I went to school with, that kind of like social environment. Instagram for a long time was what's hot, what's trendy, what's this, and TikTok kind of took that. Now arguably, and it's interesting what you mentioned about the sound perspective when you create a TikTok, because for me, I think that a lot of people sometimes misunderstand or miss trends in the respect to like, how do you get a load of growth to your account? Okay, yes, creating organic content is important, but also if you're not leveraging the trends, which arguably we don't, from a TikTok point of view, leverage as much as we probably should, and arguably I don't think you probably use it as much as you should either, if you're honest with yourself.
No, we don't.
It's one of those things where you can get something that we talk about unicorn videos all the time, right? Like, why does something get ridiculous numbers of views, or why did someone get millions or whatever? It's normally a combination of it got into the right algorithm at the right time, shown to the right people, which had the right, calls, whatever that was, whether it was watch time or interaction or etc. But also it could have been triggered by a quote-unquote trend that happened within audio, right? And I think, if you're really wanting to, and again, it comes back to priorities to an extent, right? There's one thing posting to TikTok and having some level of organic growth through that, but then there's also having what you would want to have, which is ideally explosive growth on TikTok, which is, a video got 100k randomly, right? Now, there's 2 ways from my perspective how you would do that. One is called, what I would call trend jacking, which is basically where you take a trending sound and then you create a piece of content around that then then goes into that trend, especially if you're one of the first to do it. You'll ride that trend wave all the way up. Or you create something that has a high level of engagement rate. So it could be people watch it really quickly, or they watch the whole video multiple times, which is telling TikTok, hey, this is a really good piece of content to consume. So it's then going to push it out to more people. But I think the goal when you begin should never be get this unicorn piece of content, because I think people, to an extent, they chase vanity metrics and they're like, oh, this thing got so many likes, or this thing got so many comments, or this thing got so many views. I mean, from your perspective, how do you care about views, likes, comments, etc.?
It depends on what especially if.
Yeah, and I think, I think something that we've noticed anyway is, as I was mentioning earlier, a little bit about the lurking point of view from LinkedIn. The same is true on Instagram, the same is true on TikTok, the same is true anywhere you put content. You could be putting out content that's really valuable to someone, and it could be connecting with people. It may get like, 100 views or 200 views or 1,000 views, and you get really bummed out because it's like, I only got XYZ, right? When you're seeing someone else who trend hops and gets 10k or 20k or 30k or 40k. But the thing is that you need to ask yourself, from my opinion anyway, is, are you doing it for vanity metrics, or are you doing it to grow your business? Because for me, as someone who has background in YouTube, there's a very big difference between creating something that's searchable on YouTube, and there's a difference between having a search optimized video in the respect to the video you would create anyway and search optimizing that video, and actually creating a video that's high search volume, right? As in, is designed to get attention in regards to volume of searches, right? And for me, it's the same approach when you're looking at vanity metrics on any of the socials we just described. What you actually need to understand is, firstly, well, why are you creating content in the first place? As you mentioned, is it brand awareness? Is it to explain something or give credibility or something like that? Or is it simply just to gain attention, right? And if it's just to gain attention, okay, fine. You look at those views, you look at the vanity metrics, etc. But actually, to grow your business, what you need is nurture content to actually prove to your client when they come through that 10,000, 15,000 trend sounded video that you're not just a trend hopper, you're not just talking out your ass, right? And how does people, because so many people ask me, oh, so of what I do, especially if you're like an accountant or a HR person or a lawyer or something, they're quote unquote boring trades, right? How would you go about like helping someone create content within those niches, but someone who his perception is like, the things I would create content about are employment law and it's really boring?
It doesn't, stuff like that doesn't have to be boring. So this is a lot of what we do with brands like Barclays, for instance, and it's taking stuff and natively translating stuff into a language people can understand. And we usually do that in a methodology called content pockets. So some people call them content pillars. Your Monday to Friday, what are you posting, right? What's the repetitive mini series that you can create for nonstop? And that's your business as usual, always on content. In that regard, if you're trying to talk about employment law, great. Why not do a section on employment law and use a case study of a brand that went through a certain thing and actually tell it like a bit of a story and a bit of a narrative, make it far more interesting. Or if you're going to make a TikTok around employment law, then you're going to be focusing on a 3-second hook about things like, here's one thing your job doesn't tell you about your contracts. This way, we are repurposing stuff into a format that creators have made, slotting into your format, and then you can just digest. You can say the content in whatever way you see fit. After that, after you've secured the watch time, almost with the hook line, and it's about almost thinking somewhere between a journalist and a creator, and how you hook people in those first 3 seconds. And now you've taken something that could have been redonkulously boring, the ins and outs of employment law, and turned it into an incredibly educational and hooking content channel on TikTok around how people can make sure they can protect themselves at work, and how employees can protect themselves as well. When we start thinking about that, your brand potential is endless, no matter how boring you think you are. So I guarantee there's many, many accountancies out there that could really flip things around. You just have to be brave enough to do it. And that is something that a lot of people haven't done yet, especially those who are in the professional services market. They just think, this invisible veil of professionalism is just not going to come down until one person does make it come down, and then the rest falls like a bloody avalanche.
Yeah, and I think I think we saw the same thing with content creation, right? We saw this massive rise in, as the pandemic really began, and we were given this kind of like wake up call of like, surprise, you can't actually run your business the way you thought you could. You have to now be online, right? If businesses weren't online, that was the time to be creating content, right? Because what else were we going to do? We were all locked in, and not allowed to go anywhere. But I think the principle was the ones that are still going now, because the thing that I've seen as someone who's created content consistently for 5 years is there's people who like do it for a bit, right? 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year, and then they'll disappear one day, right? Like there's people who you can go back on this podcast who I've interviewed who no longer exist on social media, right? I'm not going to point any out, but I'm sure you can find them, right? And my question, is like, why does that happen, right? Because I think it's a really interesting concept, because my assumption is it's too hard to stay consistent and it's too hard work, and they end up, having a different priority shift. Would be my assumption, right? But what's your have you seen that in your space already? You're a little bit younger in that respect in regards to the business growth, but I'm sure in your marketing world as well, you saw a similar thing.
Yeah, it's a mixture of impatience and too high expectations for what organic can provide you. I think a lot of people expect when they start making content that is out there for their industry. So say you are an accountant and you made a podcast. To you, that's absolutely revolutionary. You think businesses are going to start pouring through the door like no one's business, when in fact you've just recorded yourself on your phone for about an hour and you've left it on your website for no one to see. So sometimes it's about where you put that content and how you leverage that content. Sometimes it's about the content delivery itself. Sometimes it's about the timelines in which your content can actually help bring you that cycle. When you look at organic, you need to be looking in 12, 24-month cycles in terms of how it can actually bring you return. And you need to make sure it's activated in the right way to get return. So in your clips, are you making sure that there's clear calls to action and what you actually want someone to do? Because if you're creating something, you can easily get a bunch of views, but then why is my audience not taking any action? You haven't asked. What do you want out of it? Because once you provide, you can ask. It's not too hard. I think I always recommend, first 3 to 6 months, don't ask, just be there. You can ask for follows and stuff. That's a very normal thing for creators to do. And that's something a lot of brands don't do, is they go, hit that subscribe button, turn that notification bell on because you don't want to miss any of these videos, or make sure you hit that follow button so you can see this more on TikTok. A lot of brands just don't say it out loud, so they find out there's a lower conversion rate on that front. But then after that, they need to be activating your audience in certain ways. So if you do have a segment where you talk about X, make sure you lead them to the right destination, because people do want those resources, especially if you put in 6 months of our graft, then they can trust you. And as long as you understand the platform you're posting on, it's absolutely possible. But don't be impatient with it. You have to have an existing good traditional marketing and sales process already in your business. Do not expect organic to be the thing that provides you that. It is the add-on, it is the brand builder of the modern day, but don't expect it to bring you leads in the next 6 months, because it will not, unless you're extraordinary.
I think it's also on a level of like quote unquote luck, right? And I don't like saying that because it makes the illusion of like, oh, some people are going to get lucky, some people aren't, right? Because luck in reality is actually preparation, prepared, combined with then just execution, right? But the principle there when I say that is luck is it only takes one piece of content to go viral, and then suddenly you're invited to XYZ, right? Whatever that may be. And I think it's really important to be in the position where you are stacking the odds in your favor. And the way I look at content is you're stacking the probability of someone finding you or someone reconnecting with you to be higher than previously, right? Because and we talked about touch points a little bit earlier, the analogy I always use is we both network and we both have chances to have one-to-ones with people, but how many one-to-ones feasibly can you have in a day, right? Probably no more than 4, maybe 5 if you're pushing it. Okay. And then how many times are you going to reconnect with those people, right? In those one-to-ones, right? Maybe 2 months' time, maybe 2 weeks' time, maybe a month's time. But if you've had content that you're putting out consistently, whether that's 3 times a week, once a week, daily, whatever it may be, then they're going to have connected with you more than just those one-to-ones. Right, the one-to-one concept or the concept of having a conversation with someone is never going to be replaced in regards to like the depth that it requires and what you gain from that. But what you can replace it with to an extent, like that concept of going with that depth can't be replaced. But having those surface level touch points of, hey, do you know Colton does this? Hey, remember Colton does this? Hey, remember James does this? They can be replaced with just your audio snippets from your podcast or your videos about this or your videos about that or your TikToks or etc. And it's about putting it in the way that where those people are going to consume it, right? So a lot of the business community, for example, will spend a lot of their life on LinkedIn. Okay, cool. So why are you not putting content on LinkedIn? Right? Because that's, in theory, where your clients are, right? Or your potential clients. In the same way, you wouldn't necessarily think that TikTok is the right place because there's this misconception that between the ages of like 30 and 60 aren't on TikTok. Spoiler alert, they are, and they're actually outnumbering the ones below, I think, at the moment. So for me, it's a principle of actually just putting content out there and then trusting the process in doing it, I think, is the crux there. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't, you don't expect it to bring you the world. But ultimately, if brands are in a completely different stratosphere for those who take it seriously, and we all know it. And I always found it really weird. I think it's a big reason why I started this business in the first place, because I've worked at all levels of marketing, for omni-channel, TV, radio, you name it. But no matter where I went, no matter how big the brand was, they're still not taking it seriously. And yet we have creators left, right, and center who just sat there in their bedroom, absolutely killing these brands. And selling out every time they drop something because they were human about it and they were genuine. And it's such an easy equation for us to fix with all the degrees, all the masters, all the resources and money behind these brands. All it takes is for the right person to have the right mindset shift, and it's there. And that's why I'm always keen on a brand having a really good existing sales marketing funnel, because then there's no risk to be taken, only reward, really. Unless you do something very controversial, there's no way that putting extra effort in to provide value and entertainment and education to an audience is going to be frowned upon. There's just no way it's going to happen. And just don't underestimate the timelines on it. Garyvee CEO started well over a year ago, for him to get where he is now. And before that Garyvee CEO channel was even longer vlog and the rest of it channel for when he ran Social Chain with Stephen Bartlett, and he's transformed that and leveraged that audience. He didn't just start a new channel. So in that, when you think about that, it's probably 3, 4, 5 years, and that's the timeline of an actual creator. Think about creators like KSI. 10 years ago he started YouTube. Now he's making music and boxing people and all the rest, and making way more money than a lot of brands just as one individual. And it's not some miracle. It's consistency, patience, and hard work. Brands need to realize there's no way to get around earning those people anymore.
Yeah.
Just get the graft on and get a move on.
Yeah, there's no, that, and people ask me all the time, what's the shortcut to getting followers? I'm saying there isn't one. Doesn't exist. And, for me, I'm glad you brought up Stephen, because, Stephen Bartlett did a video a couple of days ago, or I saw it on TikTok. I don't know when it actually was posted, but I saw it a couple of days ago, explaining like the entire inner workings of his podcast, right? Because I think when people think about podcasts, they're like, to do it on his scale, he has an entire team, right, that actually helps him run this podcast. And that's ridiculous when people who don't understand the podcasting world. But he has someone who's full-time just outreaching guests and out and talking to guests and trying to organize guests, right? Then he has a full-person editor. Then he has, like two full-time camera operators who just run the podcast, right? He spent like 40 grand on kit, right? Do you need to spend 40 grand on kit? No. But what Stephen wanted to do was he wanted to create the best looking and sounding podcast with an emotion attached to it, right? So in that perspective, yes, he did need to, right? Could he have spent $4,000 and got something pretty similar? Probably. Did he want to spend something which was, he wanted to push that, talking about 1% improvement, he wanted to make that 1% improvement. And I always talk to people when they talk about video, when they talk in general about content, I'm like, how are you making your content 1% better every single day? Because if you're going to, through compounding effects, across any period of time, but I just use a year as an example, you'll be 37 times better than you were when you started, right? Through compounding. It's the same reason why do you invest in your 20s to then cash out in your 70s? Because you want the compounding effect, right? Why are you not doing that with your business now? Because arguably your business is a better catalyst than any stock, arguably, right? If you do it right and you grow it and you grow it and you grow it the way you want to, because it's completely within your control. People ask me, oh, do you invest in stocks, etc.? I'm like, no, I reinvest in my business every time because it's the one thing I can 100% control, and it will always give me a better return than any stock, because I have complete control over it. But it also means I could lose all my money, right? Because there's a higher risk there, right? But because it's in my control, I know that it's less likely.
Yeah. And I think, going back to the investment piece, like, yes, there's £40,000 in equipment. But when you look at another one of his videos, that podcast has made him over 1.2 million. It's just an investment in a piece of media. And Stephen was smart enough to know that the future of, instead of trying to, although he is on Dragon's Den, although trying to jump into the traditional TV world, he leveraged his knowledge of social media, knew that his long-term brand equity would be bought by winning over young millennials and Gen Z with this show, because he will be the main business guru for basically all of Gen Z growing up. We do not know how powerful that will be when he's our next generation's Sir Alan Sugar, let's say. Like, he will own that space entirely, all because he sat down and had a chat. So although he is an extreme example, and I think we could all communicate in different ways, and different ways will suit us better, he's doubled down in being a narrative storyteller, and it works for him perfectly. But you need to just find your style, because it can be easy to double down on something that we can see that works like Stephen, and then go, why is mine not like Stephen? Then it's because you aren't Stephen. Like, I put a quote at the end of each and every one of my sales presentations. It's just, if you're making something that's an extension of who you are, no one can replicate it. You must lead with authenticity. Well, that's a paraphrased version. It is completely true. And, just be yourself. Communicate however you want. Be as wacky or as non-wacky as you want to be. You'll find the people that you want to relate to. And if you are like your clientele, or you make something that you think your clientele will like, all the better.
And I think just I'm conscious of times. I think let's wrap up soon. But, just building off, what happens with, when you start compounding, what we're seeing Stephen do, or what we're seeing you do, what we're seeing me do. I was talking to my coach last week. The stuff I do today, I have no idea what that's going to actually, when that starts compounding on itself, those pieces of content, this conversation, etc. I have no idea what the opportunities are going to, or what door it's going to open me, right? Because what people see and what people say is, oh my God, Colin, you're doing so well, oh my God, you're really successful, blah, 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 and that's a separate conversation entirely. But what they don't appreciate is I'm as successful as the stuff I did 6 months or 12 months ago, right? So the stuff that's happening well for me now is because of the graft I did 12 months ago. The graft I'm doing now, I won't see the return on for another 12 months or maybe 18 months, right? And it's about, and this is what I mean by trusting in the process, right? Because once you've done this long enough, you have this feedback loop upon yourself that's like, actually, yeah, things are continuing to go well. Okay, yeah, okay, now it's happening. Okay, yeah, now it's happening, and it keeps going. And the only reason why, we can call it the snowball effect, we can call it feeding your business, etc. And it's all of these things because you end up being so far ahead. Yes, technically, I could stop doing content now, and I would still have a level of momentum because of the amount of content I have out there. But why would I not want to accelerate right now? And that's the reason why I think being consistent with content and continuing to be consistent with content is important, because I think there's going to be a percentage of the audience who's going to listen to this and go, okay, cool, I'm going to do content for like a year and a half, and then it's going to just work for me. Okay, cool, great. But the issue that one would run into there is that you won't have that beyond compounding effect on top of a compounding effect, right? You won't have that long-term investment to get to the sky, quote unquote, I think, as I say, I'm very conscious of time, so I wanted to give you an opportunity if you did want to ask me a question or throw in a topic for us to discuss for the next couple of minutes before we do wrap up. So did you have anything?
I think from my perspective, because you make a lot of like high quality video uses like hero promos and things like that. How are you seeing them being activated? Because, you know, I'm curious to see how, at least from a paid media performance perspective, or if they get embedded on websites, how are marketing managers these days using them? Because I can often see many a marketing budget being blown into a hero project, and then they don't know what to, or then it doesn't perform the way they want it to, and everyone gets a bit confused. And then you go back to all the points we were talking about. But are you seeing any changes in how those hero pieces are being activated, or are they still doing same old, same old?
I think the marketing space will always evolve and always change. I mean, I think in regards to hero specifically, I think there's too much, like, there's a lot of money being spent on it and not enough knowledge at the front end. And it's something that I'm trying to change whenever we have a sales conversation about a brand video or a promotional video, etc., which are all important conversations. We always have, okay, well, what's the next thing? What's the thing we're going to follow this up with? Where's this going? How are we going to put it on the website and then put it on social and then do this and then do this and then do this? Right? What's those spin-off pieces of content that infinitely loop back into that promotional video, that hero piece, so to speak? And I think, you know, in answer to the question, some are, some aren't, in the same way, like a lot of, you know, it's difficult because, you know, for me, there's only so many ways I can say it or so many ways I can suggest it, because at the end of the day, if I'm giving it to a marketing professional to use, that's up to them, right? I can say, hey, you should use this as paid ads. Hey, you could use this on the website. Hey, you can put this on social. Hey, you can do this. Hey, you can do that. But at the end of the day, a lot of the content we do is in primarily a video campaign with a similar narrative across multiple videos that is then posted across a period of time, whether that's a combination of organic and paid, or just organic or just paid, to actually have the objective met. So whatever that objective may be, right? So it might be we want to grow our TikTok, for example, right? Okay, cool. So we're going to put this content on TikTok. We know that it's going to, we know that we're targeting TikTok. So we're deliberately going to shoot it in such a way where it's deliberately going to be easily to consume at that portrait format that we talked about before. And then we're going to put some money behind it, and we're going to see what the interaction is like. Then we're going to use that to iterate on the next one, and so on. And, you know, the simple answer from what I would say to anyone listening as a final thought is take the consistency thing to heart, because at the end of the day, you can have a brand video and you can have something that sits on the website, but within one day, that's outdated, right? Now, I'm not saying you're necessarily going to be able to tell that brand video is outdated within a day, but within the next 3 to 6 months, you probably will start seeing those age kind of looks and those things where it's all very well and good having a video. And it's ironic because I've looked at our website that I only did like 8 months ago, and I'm already having to rewrite all the copy. I'm already having to basically plan to refilm every video on the website because they're already outdated. There's already stuff that is not true or is not the same in the respect of what we do. So I think it's about, as we've said a lot in this conversation, it's about pivoting and changing and constantly adapting. And, you know, the fact is that if you're going to be in the marketing space right now, you have to work fast, right? You have to change fast. You have to adapt fast. And unfortunately, if you're not, you may not be around. That's my honest answer. You know, and I think that's going to be where the future is. But for those people who want to continue this conversation outside of this podcast medium, where's best for people to reach out to you, James?
Best place to usually reach me is LinkedIn. Just have me on LinkedIn, James Gayle, or jump on the Shogun social page, drop us a follow over there. But yeah, ping me any questions you have, especially when it comes to creating mass content, or if you need help in regards to a lot of that stuff, and actually thinking more in terms of content strategy, long-term brand equity, all that kind of stuff. Let me know, because it's what we do. And especially if you know any good social media managers, we're on the hunt for one or two. So let me know if you know anyone as well by the time this episode comes out, that is.
Thank you so much for coming back and joining me once again, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from that episode. If you did and would like to see more like this, make sure to be subscribed to the channel so you can be notified when the next episode of the podcast goes live. I'll be back next week with a brand new guest to talk about something else in the marketing, sales and digital landscape. Once again, hope you have a great evening or night wherever you are, and I'll see you very,